The ATM screen said insufficient funds. I had been using that machine since they installed it, 15 years at least. Never once seen those words for my account. I stood there looking at the screen for a few seconds. Then I pressed cancel and drove home. My name is Frank Calloway. I am 74 years old. I worked in the trades for 40 years. Started as a plumber's apprentice at 19, working for a man named Ed Russo on the east side of Cleveland. I did not know anything when I started. Ed taught me everything. How to sweat a joint properly, how to read blueprints, how to tell from the sound of water moving through a pipe whether there was pressure behind it or air. I worked for Ed for 6 years, then got my journeyman card, then my master license. I started taking my own jobs in 1980. I worked construction sites, apartment complexes, commercial buildings, private homes. For 40 years I showed up. Early in the morning, in cold basements, in July heat, on holidays when pipes do not care what day it is. I did the work. I got paid. I put money into the Social Security system every single paycheck for 40 years. That was the agreement. You contribute, you get it back when you are old. Simple. My wife Margaret passed 6 years ago, breast cancer. We were married 43 years. She was the one who handled the paperwork in our house. The bills, the accounts, the insurance documents, the taxes. I was the one who fixed things. She was the one who organized things. It worked. After she died, I had to learn things I had never paid attention to. How to set up automatic payments, how to navigate Medicare's website, how to keep track of what was coming in and what was going out. I was not good at it the way she was, but I learned enough. You figure things out when you have to. That is what she would have said. I live in the same house Margaret and I bought in 1989. It is paid off, has been for 11 years. My 2 sons live out of state. Daniel is in Arizona. Robert is up in Portland. They call regularly. We talk on Sundays mostly. I see them at Thanksgiving and sometimes Christmas. They have their own lives. I do not expect more than that. I am not a complicated man. I have my morning coffee, the news, a walk when the weather cooperates. I have a workshop in the garage where I keep my tools. I go out there sometimes just to organize things, tighten things, take something apart and put it back together. Old habits. My Social Security was $2,014 a month. That plus my union pension from the plumbers local came to a little over $3,000 a month. I was not rich. I was covered. I had money for groceries, the utility bills, the house insurance, the Medicare supplement premium, and a little extra. I had been receiving those deposits for 5 years without a single problem. 5 years, every month, same amount, same day, 15th of the month, until the month it was not there. About 6 weeks before it stopped, a letter came from the Social Security Administration. I put it on the kitchen counter. I get a lot of mail and most of it means nothing. Pharmacy newsletters, credit card offers, announcements from the county about recycling schedules. I opened the SSA letter eventually, maybe 4 days after it arrived. It said something about a periodic review of my eligibility. It asked me to send in documentation confirming my work history and identity. I read it once. I thought it was one of those letters they send to everyone as a routine check. The kind where most people do not need to do anything and only a few people actually have an issue. I set the letter back on the counter. I did not respond. Margaret would have responded the same day, organized the documents, sent them certified mail. I did not. That was my mistake. I understand that now. At the time it seemed like a form letter. I was wrong. When the 15th came and the deposit was not there, I checked my account at the ATM first thing in the morning. That was when I saw the screen. I drove to my bank and went inside. The teller looked up my account. She said there was no incoming deposit from the Social Security Administration. She said it appeared the payment had simply not been sent. I asked if there was something wrong on the bank's end. She said no, the account was in order. The payment had not come from the sender. I drove to the Social Security office that afternoon. I did not call first. I knew what calling would be like. Hold music for 45 minutes and then someone who could not help me. I drove 20 minutes to the office, found parking 2 blocks away, walked in. The waiting room had about 30 chairs and most of them were full. I took a number, a 37. The screen was showing 18. I found a seat and I waited. I am not a patient man in waiting rooms, but I have spent a lot of time in them. Contractor licensing offices, permit windows, building department queues. I know how to sit and I know how to wait, and I know that the people at the windows are not the people who made the rules. Getting angry at them is like getting angry at the pipe for leaking. The pipe didn't decide to leak. I sat in that plastic chair and I waited. I read an old magazine. I watched the numbers on the screen. 2 hours and 10 minutes. When my number came up, I walked to the window calmly. I had written down what I wanted to ask. I had 4 questions on a piece of paper in my shirt pocket. The woman at the window was professional. She typed my number, looked at her screen, and told me what she could see, which was not much. Administrative hold. Review in process. She could not see the reason. She gave me the case number on a slip of paper and told me which number to call. I thanked her. I kept my 4 questions in my pocket. None of them had answers she could give me from her terminal. Contractor licensing offices, permit windows, inspection queues. I know how to wait. I sat there for 2 hours and 10 minutes. I read a magazine from 2021 that someone had left on the chair next to me. I watched the numbers change on the screen. When 37 came up, I walked to the window. The woman at the window typed my Social Security number and looked at her screen. She said there was a hold on my account. A review was in process. She could not tell me what the review was about because that information was not visible from her terminal. She said I would receive a letter. I told her a letter had already come, 6 weeks ago, asking for documents. She said she could see a record of that letter being sent, but could not see whether documents had been received or what the status of the review was. She gave me a case number written on a slip of paper. She told me to call the number on the back of the slip with the case number ready, and that representatives there would have more information. I folded the slip and put it in my shirt pocket. I thanked her. I drove home. I called the number on the slip 2 days later. I waited 41 minutes before someone answered. The representative said my case was under active review. She could see the case number, but not the details of the review. She said I should continue to wait for correspondence. I asked if my benefits would resume while the review was ongoing. She said the hold would remain until the review concluded. I asked how long that would take. She said it was difficult to estimate. I asked for a range. She said 60 to 90 days from the date the review was formally opened. I asked when the review had been formally opened. She said she did not have that information on her screen. I thanked her and hung up. I made a note on my legal pad. Date, time, representative's first name, what she said, how long I waited. I had started the legal pad the day before. Margaret had kept records like that. I finally understood why. The follow-up letter took 23 days to arrive. It said my benefits had been suspended pending a review of my eligibility and work history. It said I had a right to appeal. It said I needed to submit documentation of my work history and earnings for the years in question, though it did not specify which years were in question. It listed what I needed to send: W-2 forms, tax transcripts, employer verification letters, and a copy of my union card. Finding 40 years of employment records is not a simple thing. Some of the companies I worked for in the 1970s and 80s no longer exist. Businesses close, buildings get sold, people retire and shred their files. I spent 3 weeks going through boxes in my basement. Margaret had organized those boxes. They were labeled by year, with her handwriting on the outside. Seeing her handwriting on boxes I had not opened in years was a strange thing. I found W-2s going back to 1978. Some years were missing. For 3 years in the mid-80s, I had worked primarily as an independent contractor, and my records from that period were incomplete. I also called 3 former employers I remembered working for in those years. One company had been sold twice and was now in a different state under a different name. The person who answered did not know what I was talking about when I mentioned employment records from 1984. One company had closed entirely, the owner having retired in 2003. The third company, a commercial contractor I had worked with for 4 years in the late 80s, was still in business. The office manager looked up my name and found records going back to 1987. She sent me copies by email, which Robert printed for me. Those records covered 2 of the 3 missing years. The third year remained a gap. For the missing years, I needed to contact the IRS for official transcript records. My son Robert walked me through how to request them online. Robert is patient with technology. I am not. We spent 2 evenings on the phone, him in Portland walking me through each screen, me at the kitchen table with my reading glasses on and the computer in front of me. I got the transcripts 3 weeks later. They confirmed every year of earnings, including the contractor years I had been missing documentation for. I also needed employer verification letters for the larger companies I had worked with. 2 of them were still in business. I called both. One had records going back far enough to help me. The other said their older records had been digitized in a system change, and they could not access documents from before 2000. They were sorry. I wrote that down in my legal pad. Employer name, date called, outcome, records unavailable. I submitted everything I had by certified mail at the end of the 2nd month. Return receipt. Robert had told me to always get return receipt. The package was 41 pages. Employment records, tax transcripts, union documentation, a cover letter I typed and printed myself, and a copy of the original SSA letter with a handwritten note explaining that I had not responded to the first letter because I had not understood it required a response. I was not proud of that admission, but I thought honesty about my mistake was better than silence about it. The receipt came back signed. I put it in a folder. Evidence that the package had arrived. Evidence that I had done what was asked. I wrote the delivery date in my legal pad and circled it. Starting point of the formal review period. 60 to 90 business days from that date. I counted them out on a calendar. I was now 2 months without the deposit. My savings had gone down $3,000, covering what I needed. I am careful with money, always have been. I do not spend more than I have. But $3,000 in 2 months is $3,000. That is real. I had maybe 3 or 4 more months of reserves before I would be in a genuinely difficult situation. I did not tell my sons that. I told them there was an administrative issue being resolved. I did not tell them the savings number. I am 74 years old, and I had never in my life asked my children for money, and I was not going to. I stopped going to the diner on Thursday mornings. I had been going since Margaret died. Scrambled eggs and coffee, corner table, the same waitress for 4 years who knew my order before I sat down. $7.50. I stopped going. That is a small thing. But small things are how you understand what is being taken from you. $7.50 on Thursdays. The newspaper subscription I canceled. The bottle of decent whiskey I did not buy for my birthday. Small things. They add up in the ledger, and they add up in the feeling. Month 3, I called the SSA number again. 43 minutes on hold. The representative said my documents had been received, and the review was ongoing. She said the formal review clock had begun when my documents were delivered, not when my benefits were suspended. That meant I had been without my money for 2 months before the review officially started. 2 months of suspension, and the 60 to 90 business day clock only started when I sent the papers. She said this as if it were a standard procedure. I wrote it down. I did not argue with her. There was no point arguing with her. She had not made the procedure. She was just explaining it. I called again in the middle of month 3. Different number this time. The regional processing center Gerald would later tell me about. 37 minutes on hold. A man named Thomas answered. He pulled up my case. He said the documents I had submitted were in the queue for review. He said there were currently a significant number of cases pending, and the review was taking longer than the standard time frame. He said my case had been assigned to a reviewer, but the reviewer had not yet begun work on it. I asked if there was anything I could do to move it along. He said there was not. He said I could write a letter to the regional director requesting expedited review if I was experiencing financial hardship. I asked him to spell the title and address. He did. I wrote a letter that week. I sent it certified mail. I never received a response. In month 4, I got a letter. It said my appeal had been reviewed and a determination had been made. My benefits would be partially reinstated, with back pay for 2 of the 4 months I had missed. 2 months, not 4, 2. The remaining 2 months were under continued review pending additional verification. I had submitted 41 pages of documentation. What additional verification could there possibly be? I sat with that letter for about 10 minutes before I called Robert. Robert said, "Dad, I think you need a lawyer." I said I was not going to spend money I did not have on a lawyer for something that should have been fixed months ago. He said the money you have already lost from savings is more than a lawyer is going to cost you. I thought about it. He was right. Margaret would have said the same thing and said it faster. I found Gerald Park through the Plumbers Union Retiree Network. He had worked with union retirees before. He knew the SSA process. His fee was $950, which I paid from the partial back pay I received. He asked for copies of everything. All 41 pages of what I had submitted, all the letters I had received, all the notes from my legal pad. He spent 2 days reviewing the file and called me back on a Wednesday afternoon. He said he had found something. He said that when the SSA had migrated to a new record system approximately 2 years earlier, my file had been merged with another account. A man with a similar name and similar work history in the same region of Ohio. That man had a period of unreported income in his record, which had flagged his file for a compliance review. When the system migration occurred, the flag had transferred to my account. My 40 years of clean, continuous, documented contributions had been tagged with another man's unresolved issue. I asked Gerald if this was common. He said it was more common than people knew. Database migrations moved hundreds of thousands of records. When records were merged or linked incorrectly, the errors could sit dormant for years before triggering something. In my case, the SSA's routine eligibility review had triggered the flag, and the flag, attached to my account through someone else's problem, had stopped my benefit. Gerald filed a formal correction request with documentation showing that my record and the other man's record were distinct. He also filed a complaint with the SSA Office of Inspector General, which he said would not speed things up, but would create an official paper trail. It did not speed things up. It took another 2 months. During those 2 months, I received one letter saying the correction was under administrative review, and one call from a representative who confirmed the case was in process and could not provide a timeline. In month 6, my benefits were fully restored. I received a letter saying the administrative correction had been completed and my account had been updated. Back pay for all 4 missed months would arrive in 2 installments. The first installment came the following week. The second came the month after. No interest on the months I had waited. No acknowledgement of the savings I had spent. No compensation for Gerald's fee. An administrative correction. That was the phrase they used. As if the whole 6 months had been a clerical adjustment. I paid Gerald out of the first installment. What was left after the legal fee and accounting for what I had spent from savings was not what I had lost. It was close, but close is not the same. And the numbers do not tell you everything. Numbers do not tell you about the Thursday mornings I drove past the diner without stopping. They do not tell you about the evenings I sat at the kitchen table going through the legal pad and adding up the waiting time on hold. Hours of my life spent on hold, waiting for someone to tell me something they did not know. The months I was without benefits were the loneliest months since Margaret died. Not because I was broke. I was not broke. because I felt like I was fighting something I could not see. Like there was a problem in my file and nobody could show me the file. Like the system knew something about me that I was not allowed to know about myself. That feeling does not go away when the check comes back. It stays. Today, my deposit comes every month. I check the account on the 14th, the day before it is supposed to arrive. I did not used to do that. Now I do, every month. Not because I expect a problem, because the last time I did not look, there was one, and because this is what the experience left me with. Not anxiety exactly, caution, a kind of permanent attentiveness that was not there before. I do not know if that is wisdom or damage, probably both, and I did not find out until I was standing at an ATM with insufficient funds on the screen. If you are on Social Security or a government pension and you receive a letter asking for documentation, respond to it. Do not set it on the counter. Do not assume it does not apply to you. Respond to it, send what it asks for, and send it certified mail so you have proof it arrived. That is the one thing I would tell anyone. That letter I put on the counter for 4 days was the one thing I did that made everything else worse. Everything that came after could have been avoided, or at least shortened, if I had answered that letter the day it came. If someone you know is going through something like what I went through, share this with them. Not because it fixes anything, because it shows them that someone else has been in that chair in that waiting room, has made those calls, has waited on hold, has sent the certified mail, and is still here. My name is Frank Calloway. I am 74 years old. I worked 40 years. What I earned, I kept. That part they could not take.